Welcome to the Splash City Basketball Podcast, the home for all things Minnesota hoops from youth and high school to the pros. I'm your host, Steve Hartman, and I want to start by thanking you all for tuning in today. If you've been enjoying the show, take a quick second, subscribe on whatever platform you are listening to, leave us a review, share the pod with all your hoops junkies. It helps grow the Splash City basketball community. Today marks the third installment of my Greatness at the Position series. Today we're breaking down small forwards. We've already done point guards and shooting guards. Today we're looking at the three, the modern three. It's arguably like the most versatile, critical role, and a lot of the best players today or the last 20 years really have probably been playing this position. To help me unpack what defines this elite small forward position, some of the best players in Minnesota history, as well as those small forwards who have ever played the game, Star Tribune's Marcus Fuller. Marcus, thanks for joining me again. Thanks for coming back to the program. How have you been?
Pretty good, yeah. No, I definitely enjoy listening to all-time lists. I forget sometimes how old I actually am. So, 20 years, 30 years, let's not go back too far, but I know you'll probably have some guys that played maybe before we were born, but I'm sticking to the 2000s or even maybe just a little bit before that. I don't want to go too far.
That's fair. Everybody's got their own list. So like if it's, you do you. I have some guys just like that I remember specifically in Minnesota that might be unfamiliar to a lot of listeners, but some might remember a few of the mine on my list as well. Later we'll get into that. But Star Tribune, I know you guys have done a few lists. We could plug that, but like you guys did something, I don't know, I want to say within the last year or some, like last 25 years or so, you kind of rank some of the high school basketball players.
Yeah, so I Strib Varsity, we started it last year. High school coverage, we do every sport from fall, winter to spring, and it was my first year with the Star Tribune high school team, but also Strib Varsity debuted. This is our second year now going to the fall, but I had during the basketball season a list of the top 25 basketball players in the last 25 years, and I included girls and boys, which was really tough because you could do a list of either, and definitely, we've had some big guns over the years in the last, 10 years or so. And, we're talking Paige Beckers and Jalen Suggs and, Chet Holmgren and that group, Tyus Jones. But I think, making a list like that really had me do a little bit more history into the high school scene than I had before. I covered the Gophers in
Hmm.
college sports for a long time. And, normally it was like, hey, gotta get a couple Gophers on that list. But, we're talking about, an all-time list, players, like you said, that maybe some people hadn't heard of at the college level that were starring. Maybe they went to a smaller college. Definitely maybe didn't even play in the pros, especially on the WNBA side. But, it was really good list to get into, especially on the girls basketball side. There were some elite players at the high school level that I didn't necessarily
Hmm.
forget about, but I definitely had to be reminded how successful they were in high school. So I'm guessing, you'll probably have some of those players on your list that pretty good in high school, maybe not too much at the next level. I think my list might have some people that maybe were better after high school than they were, in high school. But yeah, those lists are fun to do, especially when you read the comments
Hmm.
afterward, like who you left off. And then some people obviously can't do the math, and we're talking about the 90s when I said the last 25 years. They forget that, yeah, that's actually just talking about the 2000s.
Yeah. Yeah. The 90s is a long time ago at this point. Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean it is the dog days of summer. There's not a ton of basketball to talk about other than the links right now. So this is a great time to do this. And then before you know it, we'll be diving into Wolves and Gophers kind of preseason outlooks and schedules. But I wanted to make sure we got this done because I think this has turned into a really fun segment where we get to talk about players that we grew up watching or have seen, play in college or maybe now in the NBA and whatever. And so it's just kind of fun to relive some of that. Before we get into our list, though, I want to just kind of get your take on the position itself, small forward, the three, kind of, there's we in the other two episodes we've talked a lot about positionless basketball, but like there still is, you know, strengths and things that you're looking for at different spots, and sometimes they complement each other. If you have an elite scoring point guard, maybe your two guard doesn't need to be a scorer necessarily. But when you think of your like ideal wing, small forward type player, what are some of the things that you think they got to be able to do X, Y, and Z, or that they should have this kind of characteristic?
Well, it depends on what level you're talking about. Since we're going to start with high school, I would say that, the size of the position definitely varies. We're talking about some of the all-time greats. So obviously these are players that went on to play in college and
Mm-hmm.
obviously some of them even in the pros. So size definitely mattered for them. But I would say like at today's game, at the small forward position, which again, we're saying small forward nowadays, it's positionless and they might use three
Mm-hmm.
guards. So your small forward
Right.
might be 6'1" or 6'2".
Yeah.
But like I think when we were watching basketball, and I think a lot of these players were on this list, the small forward position was pretty defined. The wing position was pretty defined. It was a player that, you could guard pretty much everyone on the floor at the high school level.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, some small forwards might have struggle a little bit guarding centers and real physical centers, but back to the basket ones. But for the most part, this is a player that can guard all every position on the court. Sometimes, in high school, defense is optional for some people. They are maybe not the best defenders, but I like length, I like size at that position. Offensively, this is a person that really can do it all. If you ask them to bring the ball up the court as a point guard, they can do it. Um, Definitely has to be able to score. Some of them all three levels. But I would say that a lot of the wings and the small forwards, are able to shoot the ball. But I actually like some athletes, I mean, there might be some that maybe I don't include on this list, but I think of some of the most exciting small forwards that I've seen play high school ball. They're incredible athletes, played above the rim. Certainly when we talk about some of the pros, like, yeah, those guys are the most exciting guys that we've seen play basketball,
Mm-hmm.
above the rim. And I think, Minnesota high school basketball, when I first got here, I didn't realize how talented it was. Obviously starting to cover colleges, I saw a lot of them play at that level and beyond. But when it comes to high school basketball, like obviously you got to talk about the big guys, Kevin McHale, the history there. But then you got to talk about the point guards, Tyus Jones and Khalid, Jalen Suggs. But small forward is one of those positions where like you'd be surprised, like, oh man, when it comes to high school basketball, if you just start there, like there's some really good players there. Like, some
Mm-hmm.
some players that were, if I had this guy on my all-time team, if you just made a starting five, like you'd have to strongly consider this player at that position.
Yeah. You brought up two things that I had written down about characteristics, and that's versatility and the athleticism. When I was kind of looking at the players that I picked for my two lists, it was they weren't always great at everything, but there was something that I'll just spoiler alert, but like Dominique Wilkins, right? He wasn't a great shooter, but his athleticism was off the charts, and he was dunking everything, in the 80s and going against the best teams and Pistons, Celtics, Bulls, and still putting up like 28 points a night. And so it's like to me that athleticism and physicality of being able to get to spots and get to the basket, I think is another one. And then there's other guys who maybe were just incredible scoring, more of shooters, like Kevin Durant, Larry Bird, those kind of guys, where they were just so elite at that. Maybe not as good at ball handling and passing as and Bird was, but like LeBron, right? LeBron does everything so well, but his elite athleticism, his body, his physical tools are kind of what separates him, I think, in a lot of ways too. So, not everybody in high school obviously has the physical tools that those guys have, but like, If you're a high school kid and you're 6'3", 6'4", and you can get to the rim and you can defend multiple guys, like that's kind of the ideal player in terms of like a swing forward that can do a lot of different things. And if you can shoot it, that's even like a bonus, I think, in some ways at that position. The other thing I wrote down was cutting off ball movement. Like I think of, in today's game, like Jaden, I'm excited to see him play with LaMelo Ball because I'm like, will LaMelo unlock this like backdoor lob, like this kind of more movement that I think Jaden could create some shots with? And I think as a three, although he might play the four for the Wolves, who knows? Um, but like cutting and movement and things like that, because you're not the primary ball handler. You're not always getting the shots off of pin downs and screens. They're not setting you up as like your elite shooter. So how else do you score? And it's maybe it's offensive glass or it's just straight cuts and stuff like that. So that was the other thing I had written down for my small forward characteristics.
Yeah, basketball IQ, that's not necessarily high on my list, even though, I'm sure a lot of these guys that play have one time or another been praised for that. Um, I need to probably still, a lot of players today they need to learn how to backdoor cut and all that kind of stuff. The basketball IQ part and athleticism don't usually go together. But when they do, it's definitely a player that, we're gonna consider to be one of the all-timers.
Yeah. Who are some of the players right now that you watch that would fit kind of this mold? I think of Ahmed Nur over at well, he was at Hopkins, but now he's prep school, I believe. But would you consider him kind of in this position, or is he more of like the stretch four type of position?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you bring up him because he's clearly a player that, if you just talk about pure talent, we haven't seen too many of them in the last 20 years as talented as he is. And
Hmm.
there's the reason why he is taking himself from, a borderline, uh, 3-star, 4-star player to a 5-star during the summer is because he's shown the characteristics of, what the power four schools and the NBA teams are looking at as a small forward. He's 6'9", 6'10", and he stretches the floor, shooting the ball, but he's an elite athlete. And if you combine those two skills, or those two attributes, athleticism and shooting
Hmm.
ability, and the size and length, that's what we're talking about at the pro level, small forward. But I would say at the high school level and even in college, most likely because he's 6'9", 6'10", and he has
Hmm.
the defensive ability, I would put him as a stretch four, and
Hmm.
I think he would probably just develop later as a small forward at the highest levels. But I would
Yeah.
consider him a high school power forward,
Hmm.
but he definitely has the attributes of a pro small forward. And, as you know, like the highest ranked guys are the ones that, have the highest potential. And you have to look at it position wise as a pro position as opposed to high
Hmm.
school position. Because literally 6'9" and 6'10", most guys that size play center in high school. A
Right.
Medner is not
Right.
playing center in high school.
No. Yeah.
Whether he's at Hopkins, he's still at Hopkins, or he's at prep school now, he will not play a center position.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what's interesting too about, some of this discussion is that what you play in high school isn't necessarily your position, right? Like you're kind of forced into it based on your team structure and what your team needs, and guys might have to do more things that they wouldn't normally do if they were playing. So, maybe it's even on AAU they wouldn't play that position, but because of their team, they kind of have to. Who else is out there right now? In that like 6'5" to 6'7" range that has multiple skills and athleticism like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're just talking about in high school right now in Minnesota, I
Yeah.
would say Vincent Cronin out of Edina
Oh yeah.
fits that mold. I mean, he's the best athlete in the state as far as run and jump. I think I wrote a not I think I know I wrote a column a few years ago when he was a freshman, and I call him the best dunker in the state of Minnesota as a high school freshman. Why do I do that? And not because I know every slam dunker in the in the state, but he did win a dunk contest, during the summer against some of the best athletes in Minnesota when he was 15 years old. And
Mhm.
he was doing between the legs, 360s, windmills, all the type of things that you'd want. And then he won a national dunk contest as well. So he has the athleticism. He always had it. He's kind of developed the other pieces of his game in order to make sure that, teams at the Division 1 level, he's going Division 1, he's going to Miami of Ohio, but he only had his Division 1 scholarships this summer. And part of that was because he was able to stretch the floor, show he could shoot the ball, put the ball on the floor. And so I think I see him as a small forward in college, and he's one of those like a mid nerd that because of his he's about 6'6", 6'7". Because of his
Mhm.
size, you're going to see him play a lot in the inside in an interior when if a team doesn't have much size. But he's definitely a small forward in college, and I really think that he's a steal for Miami of Ohio. I mean, I know they had an incredible
Mhm.
year last year. They went undefeated for most of the season. But I really thought that power forwards were going to look at him at some point, but I think he made a really good decision to go to a place where he can play right away as a freshman in college.
Yeah, yeah. And at a program that, coach knows what he's doing. They're going to be competitive. They're going to be on people's radars this year, like you said, after last season's last undefeated team in college basketball. Ty Schlegel was the other one that came to mind too for me. Um, Maybe a little. He's a physical kid. I'm sure he's been working on his game all summer, but he's heading to Nebraska. He'll be a senior this year as well, Creighton Hall, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, he'll be out for a while.
Yeah.
He suffered an injury, and best of wishes to him in his recovery. If he plays this season, that'd be great. For Creighton, maybe it's best for him to just make sure he's the healthiest he can be. Going into the off season and before he gets to college. But you know, if you talk about small forwards or the position where we were talking about guys being able to do a lot of things, he's definitely one of those guys that's been like that since he was young.
Hmm.
He's had the size for a long time. Probably hasn't grown since he was, maybe eighth grade, ninth grade, but he was always that guy that, it didn't matter that he was the tallest guy on the floor at that age. You wanted him handling the ball. He could shoot it. He obviously was high basketball IQ, and some of the stuff you're talking about knowing what to do on the ball and off the ball. I think Ty is for sure a guy that Nebraska is gonna be able to use in a lot of different ways.
Hmm. Yeah, a couple of tough injuries for some local kids with Christian Wiggins going down too before his freshman year at Iowa State. So tough deal, man. Um, well, let's turn it around. Let's not dwell on the negatives, the difficulties here, but let's get into our top five. Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
Hey, it's your show, man. Let's hear what you got.
All right. Here we go. So I will start with I'll go five, four, three, two, one. So number five is the guy that I had a couple other people there, but I wanted to give him some love because I remember being a young kid in Western Minnesota and hearing all about this guy. And Jeff Norgard I think he scored 1,800 points. He was like the best player in Western Minnesota. Played at Dawson Boyd. Ended up going to Green Bay, where he led the Phoenix to two NCAA tournaments, I think, and was the player of the year in that league
I
at the time.
remember I
So
remember him in the NCAA tournament. It was pre before I ever got to Minnesota, so I didn't know. I actually forgot he was from Minnesota, but I do
yeah.
remember him from his Green Bay days. Yeah, he was such a Wisconsin guy, like because of his
Hmm.
college career that I thought he was from Wisconsin.
And
I
he's
totally forgot he was from
famously
Minnesota.
he is Con Knippel's uncle. So there you go.
Interesting.
Um, yeah, number four, I am going with Joe Coleman out of Hopkins, Minnesota, Mr. Basketball, played for the Gophers, obviously. A lot of Gophers on this list, actually. Jamison Battle, I included. He almost slipped my mind, and then as I'm watching his career develop and just how he's going to be a guy that sticks in the league for a long time, and I kind of lean towards that because to me that's telling me that you've figured it out and you found something that you're excelling at if you are in the NBA. So Jamison Battle I have, And then I have 1A and 1B, I guess. It was hard for me to pick, but I'll go with Sam Jacobson as number one because the 97 Gophers team is still like the team in my sports, fandom. That I will always remember where I was, the feelings I had when that team won. But Amir Coffey has really carved out a heck of a career as well. And um, during the Patino years, that was such a great get for the Gophers to get him because I think he probably, if he didn't hurt his ACL, he probably would have maybe gone somewhere bigger at the time, but just phenomenal. So yeah, I guess all of them, but Nordgaard were Gophers. I have a couple other guys I'll mention, but I want to get to your thoughts and then your list.
Yeah, I mean, just my thoughts on your list. I mean, some of those guys I did cover, Joe Coleman and obviously Amir Coffey. I knew a little bit more about Amir in high school. Obviously Joe played for Hopkins as well, but I feel like, with Amir, like early on, not just because he was Richard Coffey's son, he was really coming along as like one of the best players in the state, had the size, had that ability to just kind of do it all, like we say. Um, he really surprised me in the fact that he picked the Gophers. I know that Richard obviously he's got the lineage there, but like if you look at the way his recruitment was going, like you said before the injury he suffered and missed his last AAU season, he was getting
Mm-hmm.
looked at by some pretty big time schools. It's funny that there's that there's the history of the Gophers not getting Rick Rickert, right? And then they got him after he decommitted from Arizona. Well, like there's a time when Amir was being recruited by Arizona, and obviously a team like that is competing for national championships. I don't know, I can't remember what they were going through at the time as far as coaching, but like all of a sudden, he gets hurt. Gophers were always in there, but they became, that was the team, and he ended
Mm-hmm.
up going through some injuries with the Gophers, but I always remember him in his last year. I didn't think they were going to make the NCAA tournament. I know we're talking about college, but like, you know, Patino was kind of on the hot seat, and he made that run at the end of the year where he was scoring 30. I think back-to-back
Mm-hmm.
games. They hadn't seen that since Vincent Greer, like over more than a decade previously, and we kind of always knew Amir had the ability to be a pro. His freshman year, he really looked good. Came right off the bat and just showed that he had the NBA potential. But I think capping it off with that year and getting them into the tournament that last time under Patino, that was really fun to watch.
Mm-hmm.
I also ended up getting injured that year and suffered my first knee injury. And, I don't remember too much of what happened in the NCAA tournament because I was in a lot of pain. But
Uh,
that was a that was a year where he definitely showed what he could do at the pro level. And I know he didn't get drafted, but he's definitely showed that he can have a long career in the NBA. He's still there. I believe he was with the Bucks.
yeah,
But like again, I can't say enough about Amir and the family too. I mean, it's just a great basketball family. So I
yeah,
would just
yeah.
mention Amir because Amir is on my list as well. I don't have really a ranking like you do.
That's
It's
all
a little
right.
tough for me to rank, but Amir's on that list, and we talked about him. We didn't really talk about his high school career, but I mean, it's Hopkins, man. They win a lot of
Yeah.
state championships under Ken Novak, who's the legend. Um, we did have a quick conversation before this started about positions, and I initially thought, should I put Sam Jacobson on here because I consider him a guard. But if you look at his athletic ability, his size at about what he's about 6'6", I
Mm-hmm.
really do think that the small forward position fit him better in high school and college, and he really didn't have much of a NBA career. So I like the fact that you mentioned him because before I got to Minnesota, if you talk about Minnesota high school players that I knew of, um, Sam Jacobson would top the list. I
Hmm.
mean, I'm from Hawaii. I'm from the West Coast. I didn't know a lot of Midwest players, especially when they were coming through high school. The 90s were a time when, you know how it is, like we just couldn't look up players on the internet and things like that. Like we had
Yeah.
to go by word of
Yeah.
mouth. And by the time he got to the Gophers, I mean, everybody was talking about Sam Jacobson. Um, and he was an exciting player to watch in college. So I can't say enough about Sam and having him on a list like this because if I could rank him, he would be number one. And funny story about him is when I first got to Minnesota and started covering the Gophers. Actually, it's before I started covering the Gophers full time. I went out to a pickup game at the Woodbury Lifetime Fitness, and I might have been on Sam's team, and I didn't get the ball much at all, and I was pretty frustrated. Not to say I'm, a great player or anything, but I thought I could play a little bit. I thought I deserved maybe one pass or two, and I got really frustrated. And I asked, I didn't recognize Sam at the time. I don't know why I didn't, but I just didn't. And I asked one of my teammates. I said, why wouldn't he? Who does this guy think he's in the NBA? And he's like, yeah, he did get drafted. And I'm like. I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, that's Sam Jacobson because we were in Woodbury Park. Cottage Grove isn't too far away, and I put two
Yeah.
and two together. And so my first time playing pickup ball in Minnesota was on the same team with Sam Jacobson, and I always remember that. But some of the other players on my list, um, kind of have to go back a little bit. Um, you know, Devean George, I know that, people are going to
Oh,
say
yeah.
like, he didn't, what did he do in high school? He went to Division III out of high school. But I believe he was at, Benilde St. Margaret and, he's a Minneapolis kid. And I just put him on there because like going from Division III to the NBA and winning championships with the Lakers, he's always
Hmm.
going to be a guy that like is remembered in the city, as far as
Yeah.
like representing the city. He goes back and he does a lot of good things for the youth. And so, and
Hmm.
being able to play, on he was a central figure on those Lakers
Yeah.
championship teams. It wasn't like he was, getting a lot of passes from Kobe or Shaq, but he hit his shots when he needed to, and he was a great defender. He was a good athlete, and I just remember him, man. And I didn't even know he was from Minnesota when he was playing for the Lakers because at that time I was not here in Minnesota. But once I found out he was, I was like, oh, I got to look this guy up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, his
Yeah.
story is incredible. Augsburg, Division III, and then getting drafted and going and having a career like that where he can win
Yeah.
championships. Hats off to Devean George, man. So he's got to be on my
Yeah.
list. And then
Great.
so that's
Yeah.
three. That's three
I
three
feel
players,
awful.
right?
I missed that one. That's a great one. Yeah.
Yeah,
11
I'm
year
glad I
NBA
can. I'm
career.
I'm
Yeah.
glad I can make you feel off of there on your own show. I appreciate that.
Yeah. No, yeah.
Um, no,
You're
it's
crushing it.
fine. No, I'm not. I'm not. And then so the last two are like a little bit unconventional because I think that they might be a different position on other people's lists. But one of them, I'm gonna go further back. It's Isaiah Dahlman.
Hmm.
Um, he wasn't like necessarily a great college player, or obviously he didn't play in the NBA. But when he did graduate, I believe he was the all-time lead scorer in Minnesota history, and I actually included him on my top 25 players. I believe
Hmm.
in the history uh last 25 years. I think he's in that range. I'm pretty sure he's in that range, right? I didn't get that wrong.
Yeah. No,
Um,
definitely. Yeah.
because I'm thinking about his sister as well, Rebecca. She obviously
Hmm.
was the all time leading scorer until Man and Greenway broke that record this year. So the Dahlmans, hats off to them, another great Minnesota basketball family. Isaiah, I'm giving him credit for his amazing high school career.
Yeah.
Bram was they were doing their thing in greater Minnesota, and so I give them hats off to Isaiah Dahlman. The Dahlman, name is still being talked about today. And then, last person on this list is, and first of all, Michigan State. getting players out of Minnesota. How about like, you know, they obviously, they got Allen Anderson. Like I thought about putting Allen Anderson on this list. I did not because I just wanted Dahlman in there, and I'm like, well, Michigan State, Minnesota, that connection. I got to pick one of them,
Hmm.
and I ended up picking Isaiah Dahlman for his high school career for what he did individually. But Allen Anderson was a hell of a player, won a state championship at De La Salle, and then obviously he was an MVP in his senior year with the Michigan State Spartans on the Final Four team in 2000 in the mid 2000s. So good for him to have a college career like that, and he went on to play almost a decade in the NBA. So
Hmm.
didn't surpass Dahlman for me for my top, small forwards. My last small forward is a guy who I think you're probably not going to say was a small forward, and it's Royce White.
Oh
Now,
yeah.
I say Royce as a small forward because of his skills. Okay, I mean he whatever you want to do as far as a basketball player, like we're gonna talk about NBA players here in a minute. Like he's like the high school version of like LeBron in Minnesota. Okay,
Hmm.
like you talk about the history of players in Minnesota. He was kind of like LeBron in Minnesota as far as like you're not gonna see a player at that size, at 6'8", 250 pounds that can do it all. I mean, he could handle it. He could play point if he wanted to. He could shoot it.
Hmm.
He was a good enough athlete where he'll put you on a poster. He's a great rebounder, passer, like everything. So,
Hmm.
and he proved that at not only winning a state championship with Hopkins, but he also proved that with Iowa State,
Hmm.
right? I mean, he took him to the Sweet 16, I believe, and ended up being drafted in the first round. And he didn't make it in the NBA, and I know he's going through some controversy right now, Royce. But we're not going to mention some of that. But like, when you think about high school players in Minnesota, I think of Royce White as, recently we talked about like transfers. You know, don't that's not breaking news. We all know that Chloe Johnson transferred from Duluth Marshall to Proctor, and she's a 5-star player, one of the best in the country. And I tried to think of like the last in-state Minnesota transfer, boys or girls, that was like a 5-star level player. And it's probably Royce White, when he transferred
Hmm.
from De La Salle to Hopkins. And I know there's some stuff, off the court, some of that, but like he won a state championship, at Hopkins, and he was not a McDonald's All-American, but he was a Jordan Brand All-American, and he ended up going to the Gophers. So, like, I feel like Royce White to me, as far just straight up talent, you know, what he was able to do with the basketball, I put him on my
Hmm.
small forward list, and I'm pretty sure my small forward would beat your small forwards in a game of 5-on-5.
Yeah, the we had almost the same except for I didn't have him. I have him not to jump too far ahead, might be on my next list as we look at power forwards, but I totally get that. I get that the way he played for sure. I had Allen Anderson and Isaiah Dahlman were my next two on my list as well. So the big miss I had was, I mean, you're the historian, Marcus, so you got it. It's probably fresh on your mind. Devean George was the big mess, but otherwise, pretty similar list. So I think, yeah, you're probably right. You got the size with Royce and Devean George. So yeah, but yeah, it's always funny because I'm trying to think of like who am I missing? Like who else is out there? And I wrote this down. I checked it twice, and then Devean George, the NBA champion, slips through my fingers. So good call.
Yeah, no, I
Uh,
appreciate that.
well, I mean, that was like I was probably got a high school, like senior, early college. So it's like that's my prime sports viewing years. You'd think would have remembered, would have remembered him, but big mess. So, um, I want to hear more about the Sam Jacobson pickup game, by the way. So we'll do that off air. Uh, let's move to the all-time list. I'm thinking this, when the other ones we've done have been fairly consistent. A couple guys here or there might not be right. So I'm curious to hear who you have. In order, this time starting first, I have LeBron, Larry Bird, Dominique Wilkins. Then I was gonna have a couple guys, and I had to rethink because I started grabbing other guys, and I'm thinking Kevin Durant is gonna be my fourth, and Dr. J is my fifth, which means I have to leave off Scottie Pippen and Elgin Baylor, which is crazy to do. But yeah, I mean Durantula, Dr. J. I mean it's kind of hard to leave them off a small forward list.
Yeah, I mean, you got to have LeBron and Larry Bird. Um, for me, after that, it's very, very subjective, and I don't like a list that doesn't include great athletes. So like at the small forward position, so I gotta have Dr. J on there. He'd be number three for me. Um, and then Kevin Durant's probably the best scorer other than Jordan of all time. So he would be five. He would be my fourth, and my fifth would probably be, I mean, I I like I like Scottie Pippen. I mean, he won as many championships as Jordan won because he was right there alongside him. So,
Yeah.
um, he might be the best defender of its small forward position of all time as well. So, pretty solid list, I think.
Yeah. The other one, and I don't know how you feel about this guy, but Kawhi Leonard. Like, where do you feel like Kawhi Leonard fits in? I mean, just outside. He was actually the best player on a team to win a title, which Scotty, maybe fortunately, unfortunately, could not be the best player on his team. Dominique obviously never won a title. I don't know if you'd consider Durant the best player on a team to win a title because I think Steph was probably that guy. But Kawhi's sneaky in this list too.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kawhi, he's got a bad rap because of the last few years of him being injured, and he started off his career really not being even thought about as being one of the all-time best. He was just behind that group that were Hall of Famers that won with the Spurs,
Hmm.
and all of a sudden, like he just wins MVP of a series, and it's like, okay, do we need to take this guy seriously as one of the best players in the NBA? And then he proved it, obviously, when moved on and won a championship with the Raptors. But I don't think that he necessarily gets to that level because when he was winning a championship with the Spurs, he was kind of like, I don't want to say piggybacking, but he was definitely one of those guys that you didn't have to focus on as the main option. They had so many other
Hmm.
weapons and Hall of Famers that, he kind of did his role and did it to the best of his ability. And, we realized like he was one of the best players in the NBA, or would become one of the best players in the NBA eventually. And then now at the end of his career, I wouldn't say the end of his career, but like I would say he's past his prime. We're seeing that like, maybe he can carry a team to a championship again, but he's gone through some things that like we're starting to question that.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. It's tough. It does feel like for a lot of these, like even the shooting guards, it was like Jordan, Kobe, and then the rest of it after that could be kind of subjective. And the same with this, where it's LeBron and Larry, and then after that, there's a lot of guys with probably some incredible strengths, but also some flaws in their game. I like Dominique because I just remember growing up watching him and battling. Like he had to, he was going against the best of the Celtics teams. Then it was the best of the Pistons teams. Then it was the Jordan team. Like just a guy that maybe they had some good teams. They had Doc Rivers, they had Kevin Willis. Like the Hawks had some good teams, but just not enough to get past those guys. So you never really got to see him in the finals. But man, like 6 seasons where he averaged over 28 a game. Probably should have been closer to some MVPs, except for Jordan and Bird were dominating and Magic and stuff. So, but yeah, supreme athleticism. I mean, human highlight reel for a reason. So I included Dominique just from an aesthetically pleasing watching him play.
Oh no, I loved human highlight film for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, pretty close. Like I said, like not too far off. I think sometimes I'm not the biggest, I don't know. Not that I'm not a Durant fan. I just sometimes kind of watch, when he was with the Thunder and they had a 3-1 lead and they just couldn't get it done. And then it feels like he's kind of piggybacking the Warriors. And so I maybe discredit him for some things where he's obviously just an all-time, shooter, scorer, 6'10", 6'11", whatever he is, like just crazy athleticism too. So, but got to make cuts when you're doing 5. It's a lot easier to do 10, but we're not here to make it's not going to be easy on this show. We're going to make it tough. Any final thoughts on small forwards before we let you out of here?
No, I feel like, Minnesota is definitely, like I said, is underrated state for producing, like, not just talent at the point guard and the big man position, but, small forward is a position where, you don't really think about it. Like, now that it's positionless basketball and we got a lot of guards playing, 3 guards playing, but we've had some pretty good ones over the years. And, guys that are still playing in the NBA, I love the fact that, you've got a Amir Coffey and a Jamison Battle, still, going from team to team, but they're still making an impact wherever they go.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, being at that summer league too, like there's some guys that show up there, you're like, could eventually make it to that mark, or even just playing in Europe, like professional in Europe is a great career. And there's just so many great players. It's fun to talk about them. It's fun to highlight them. So, I know we're getting into football season, so you're busy with that. Anything you want to plug on your work or anything with Strib Varsity you want to highlight?
No, I mean, just I'm excited. It's year 2 of Strib Varsity, and we got the Randy Shaver show that will be post game, Friday nights, and we're excited just to be able to have another season with him and be at as many top games as we can. I'm covering volleyball as well. We'll have a lot of hockey coverage throughout the season, basketball as well in the winter, and a lot of other great sports. Just exciting.
Yeah, check it out if you haven't. Don't shy away from getting the paid subscription either. It's okay. You gotta pay those bills, man. It's appreciate the work.
It's worth it.
Yeah, totally is. Yep. I let my subscription lapse for a couple months, and the other day I was like, oh God, like I need to get back in here. So yeah, it's totally worth it. So thanks for all you do there. Thanks for all the writing. Appreciate you coming on and sharing your thoughts here. This was fun. Everyone listening, again, if you have a chance, hit the subscribe button, follow, leave a review. Would appreciate that. Next up, we're going to be talking about power forwards on the next episode. So that'll be a fun conversation as we go from enforcers in the 80s to stretch fours nowadays. Thanks again, Marcus. Appreciate you coming on. I'm Steve Hartman, and this has been the Splash City Basketball Podcast.
Bagging that bag.